Okay, welcome back, everybody. After a break, James, take it away, and sorry for the stop and start.
No problem, Jim. That's all right. Yeah, it's just the book, anyways. It's just the book is in relation to the video we showed earlier about the Irish connection to the Choctaw Native American tribe, and the book is called The Long March, and it was printed in 1998 by Wolfhound Press Limited in Dublin, Ireland. Anyway, in 1998. And the author is Marie Louise Fitzpatrick. But basically, the book was commemorated and launched by our first female president of Ireland, Mary Robinson, back in 1998, and it's commemorated. The little writing on the inside, I'll read it, is in 1847, an impoverished group of Choctaw Indians collected $170 from their meager resources for the relief of Ireland's famine. The Long March is the story of Tuna, a young Choctaw who must make his own decision about whether to answer the Irish people's plea for help. Tuna has heard of the Long March, when the US government forced his people to leave their ancestral home in Mississippi for the new lands in the West. But as the tribe debates whether to send help to the Irish, Tuna's great-grandmother tells him the full story for the first time. He learns about the many miles walked without blankets or food. He learns how families were forced to leave the bodies of their loved ones on the trail. He learns of a great secret about his own family history. It's a truly beautiful short story. It's something that's a lovely story to read to your children. And as I said, it's beautifully illustrated. The author wrote and co-wrote, and the drawings are done as well by co-author as well, a Native American. And they're all hand-sketched drawings. I'm just trying to find some of the lovelier ones, or the more, one of the ones you can see up close, I suppose. But it's just a beautiful example of of the collective intelligence. What we're doing here as two separate as separate people all over the world, we're coming together. You know what I mean? And if they can do it back in 1847, when they only heard it by word of mouth, surely we can do with all the technology and everything else today. We can help each other now as well. I mean, the Irish are showing that they're doing that now. They're repaying with thanks to the Choctaw and Navajo nations at the moment. But we can do that on a grand scale.
Beautiful, James. Wow, just beautiful. And you know what? These create wonderful examples of communities of communities, a community of communities, right? Which is what we're one of the fundamental foundational pillars of this whole thing is a community of communities, right? Where in a sense, like for me, my home community will always be this one here, the Block Party and the Solution Club. This is my home base, right? Now, I may, and I often do, venture out from here and, check in with some other community, right? Where it may be a whole different culture, a whole different focus, a whole different set of basically agreements as to what reality is, right? See, in our community here, the Block Party / Solution Club / VCI community, because it's really all three of those in one. Anyway, more on that later. But we're kind of a mashup of communities, a collage of communities ourselves. What was I saying? Yeah, so any community I visit might be, have a total, oh yeah, that's what I was saying. So in our collage of communities, we have tremendous urgency around exponential planetary overheating. As I'm I presume, Ben, you're familiar with Guy McPherson and his work and all that. Oh, that's right. That's probably it. That's how you found out about us. Okay. So sorry about that. Okay. See, when you're when you're 14 hours into the block party, you don't necessarily remember everything. I get a break in 1 hour. In 1 hour, Mr. Nolan Straight, who you may have seen on previous videos, he what would be the word? Moderates, mediates, whatever. He does what I do. I don't want to say lead because we're all leaders here, but he moderates and manages the block party from 9 p.m. my time to 2 a.m. starting in 1 hour.
Facilitates?
There you go. Facilitates. Thank you. So anyway, and he's awesome. So you'll love meeting him. He'll love meeting you. And let's see. So yeah, community of communities. And we've been developing a strategy that we're super excited about for activating a planetary community of communities around what starts out as one medium-sized to medium-large goal, right? And then grows from there to XXXXXL goals of feeding everyone worldwide nutritious plant-based foods and ending pandemics and cooling the planet, all through the application of the collective superintelligence, which will very intentionally emerge, where emergence meets intentionality, will emerge collective superintelligence. And then collective superintelligence is what will complete the set of solutions needed to solve our most daunting problems, and then all the rest of our problems, to the extent that they can be, reasonably solved, I would say, right? Which is a lot. We can cool the planet with enough SRM. So the starting point, remember how I said there's like a medium, large chunk that we're taking on first that will then expand into the rest. So the starting point that we've figured out over the course of the last 14 hours is that we're going to start with ending hunger, feeding everyone in Brooklyn, New York, and do it ongoingly. I'm going to go on mute for a minute, take a sip of water, let anyone else who wants to talk.
Well, I'm just going to say that I chose that image there in the book. I think you can see it there clearly. And the reason I chose that image is because that in itself, not only are the lessons in it of the trials of the Choctaw and the Long March, and the fact that that's still remembered today by the Irish and likewise by the Choctaw. But this is the earliest form of collective intelligence here anyway in process, where the whole tribe got together and they had a dilemma, they had a problem or a focus and they got together and they talked until they came together with a unanimous agreed decision on what to do. And they were discussing, how do we help somebody far, far away? And is it the right thing to do, given that we've already put up with so much trial and misery ourselves and barely have anything, but are we willing to give what we don't even have ourselves and send it to Ireland? And they did. $170 was a fortune to them in that day. It was everything they had, but they chose to do it. So I mean, I could have chose other beautiful pictures in the book, as I said. There's some beautiful illustrations in it, and it's but this is definitely what we're trying to do here, and this is an example of the earliest form of collective intelligence, getting together and talking and you know, coming up with the solutions. Just do this in a global stage. You know what I mean? Go back to to our roots. This is where it began in the first place.
Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, I may take the opportunity to about camera Australia, which is quite interesting in a number of ways. Around the world, of course, one of the first priorities that everyone looks at is how to transform the production of electricity, which is still largely taking place through coal-fired power plants, natural gas, and even some of the renewable energy isn't really very sustainable, like biomass burning, or hydroelectric power has also got some problems in that the lakes in which the water stands go up and down, and that creates at the edges a lot of vegetation that constantly floods or not, and that actually produces methane. So there's all kinds of things. If you add up all the aspects of all the ways to generate power, the cleanest ways that we have at the moment are solar, and that's both solar photovoltaic, but you also got the solar thermal, where the sun actually heats up the bricks of the building, etc. So solar is the biggest promise, actually, of getting more sustainable. Wind power is, of course, a huge other contributor, and then there are some smaller ones like geothermal, wave power, etc. The best terminology used in the Green New Deal and by other studies is that what they want is clean, renewable power. So clean renewable is a phrase that means that it has to be well, with the least emissions we can achieve. And also other aspects are the time scale at which we can implement it. And for quite a number of reasons, nuclear is ruled out, rules itself out because of the long delays that it takes before it can be implemented. So if you're looking at a window of perhaps 10 years or less, if you have to transform most of the generation of electricity in that period of time, nuclear simply doesn't get into the picture because it takes more than 10 years before a nuclear power plant that is planned now will be operational. And that doesn't even talk about all the waste problems, etc. So what we are looking at mainly is solar photovoltaic and wind turbines. In Australia is very fortunate in that it has a lot of sun, of course. It also has plenty of wind opportunities. It even has a large amount of wave potential in the south, and also ocean heat exchange, if you like, in the north. So there's plenty of opportunity for Australia, and that's why people in Canberra who are a bit more aware, I think, of all these things and a bit more aware of the dangers of climate change, they have pushed for the so-called clean renewable transformation to happen as quickly as possible. And it was mostly achieved last year. So in Canberra, we have 100% renewable electricity generation. And one of the things that I should qualify it a little bit, because some of the, or most of the power is actually imported. So they have built special transmission lines to places as far as South Australia in order to get energy from wind turbines that are located there all the way to Canberra, which is a bit more expensive, of course. But people were so eager to reach the 100% renewable that this was really fast-tracked and achieved last year. So that is an enormous step in the right direction, and it can be improved in all kinds of further ways. But the focus now has changed on other things because that milestone has been reached. We're looking at where other transmissions come from. And Canberra actually, as a city, has not got too much agriculture. It's mainly an urban area. So the focus for Canberra now is on 3 points, I should say. First one is heating, because heating is not done by electricity. Most of it is done by natural gas that's piped to all the houses. So there is a strong strategy now to move from natural gas to electricity for heating. And when that's done by heat pumps, for instance, in the houses, that is also more efficient, and it is actually cheaper as well. So the council in Canberra is trying to convince people, encourage them to switch to electricity, and that is one way. The other big thing, of course, is transport, and Canberra has already done some things like introducing light rail. The big problem is that some of the key policies that could influence this are controlled by national government and not at a local level. So that complicates the instruments, the policy instrument range that are at hand in order to influence things. One of the things that Canberra has in hand is that cars have to be registered locally just to get a number plate. And what they have introduced is that if you have a car that is responsible for a high level of emissions, you pay more registration fees, whereas if you have low emissions or even have an electric car, so you pay almost no registration fees. So the extra that is taken from the high polluters is actually used to subsidize the low polluters, which is an excellent way. It has only it has some limits because Canberra has a city adjacent to it, which is Queanbeyan, and that is actually in the state of New South Wales. But being so close, Canberra can do very little about, for instance, fuel stations, because if they would become too expensive in Canberra, people would just go over the state border, which is only a few kilometers, and fill up their car in Queen Bean. But there is now another policy being considered, and that is when you buy a car, you have to pay stamp duty. And what they're now thinking about is introducing negative stamp duty for cleaner cars and higher stamp duty for more polluting cars. So it's the same principle, but that would help enormously, because once a car has been bought, it stays on the road probably for 10 years or longer. So it's an enormously important decision to make people not buy a polluting car, even though they like the car or whatever reason. So to discourage that, it's important to do things like that to work with the stamp duty. So that's another thing. At the moment, it's quite interesting, of course, like everywhere else in the world, because of the lockdown, there's hardly any traffic. But yeah, which is good in that sense, and that gives everyone a bit of a break to think about how you actually do your trips, whether you need them. And in a lot of cases, people are now moving to communication through things like Zoom, like we're doing now, as an alternative to making trips. And I used to attend scientific conferences here in Canberra at university, and they were very busy. It was very attractive to be there, but in hindsight, I actually prefer the setting here, because it saves you the time of the trip, and you are a bit more comfortable at home anyway. You can take a drink when you want, etc. And I think this is actually the future. So I would rather attend conferences online than physically in person. Now, there is one other, and that's the third part of the items that we're focusing on Canberra, and that is what they call the embedded emissions. So if you buy a product, the product can be produced in a place where there were high emissions during the production, during the mining of the resources, and also the transport, even distribution, sales, and everything that adds up to the total emissions associated with the product, including the disposal after use. That's called the embedded emissions. And the problem at the moment is that those emissions are not included in a lot of models. So national models don't really include things like the shipping to places abroad if they export something, or the shipping to the nation itself. They're kind of based on the emissions that are generated in the nation itself. And because of that, things like the embedded emissions don't get the attention policy-wise that would be needed to get to a cleaner overall society. So what a lot of people have been, well, a lot of people, not too many people, let's rephrase that, because we need to think about this more, are arguing is that if there are any fees on products that are causing pollution, those fees can be imposed on the local sales of the product rather than in the nation where they are produced. So that's a different perspective. It seems at first hand to be more complicated because you have to work out for each product how much the embedded emissions would be. It seems easier to say, well, let's just put a carbon tax on top of fossil fuel producers whenever they produce so many tons of coal, oil, natural gas. We add fees on that and let the producer include it in the price from then on. So that's done until now, but that doesn't really work much for these embedded emissions. So again, that's why the discussion now is to go to some ways of taxing it locally. And that is pretty hard because in most nations, the overall control of a tax is held at national level. So income taxes and a lot of other taxes are all controlled by federal government. They impose it. They so yeah, that's a problem. And I, including very few other people, have for a long time argued not only to include the embedded emissions, but also to create some variation. It makes more sense to let local communities organize their own ways of cleaning up their mess. And the thing is, we already have international agreement. The agreement was there in 2000. When was it? The Paris Agreement. It seems so long ago now, but we had an agreement internationally, accepted by virtually every nation on the world, including the United States at the moment, and it's still not officially withdrawn from the United States because there is a period before they can actually withdraw.
I've got a question, if you don't mind, Ben.
Yeah.
Okay. All of this seems to me essentially irrelevant in the short term in the face of the death spiral that we're in, right? You know, it'd be like me, you know, saying, you know what, I'm going to spend the next hour reading material about losing weight. I'm overweight, you know, so that I can lose weight and so that my heart will be healthier and all that going forward. Okay, great. But it'd be like me, like taking an hour and to read that material while my house is on fire. Wouldn't it make a lot more sense for me to put the book down, call the fire department? Hello, my house is on fire. Please send over the truck and put it out. Then once the fire is out, then pick up the book. Because here's the thing, right now, the things that are just coming at us like a freight train, a death spiral, are exponential planetary overheating, the only antidote for which at this late stage in our overheating cancer is solar radiation management, what we call SRM, right? That's
Well,
huh?
yeah, very, very good point, Jim.
Yeah.
What I think is we need, what I like to say, all hands on deck. We need to make every effort that we can take to combat the danger. And the danger is not a remote danger, it's imminent. And what I was talking about here, reducing emissions, is one of the the types of action that needs to be done. When the house is on fire, you don't want to keep throwing buckets full of petrol on top of the roof. And that's what effectively is happening with the emissions that are ongoing now. So every year things get even worse than they were. And the biggest problem with the Arctic is not what many people think it is. Many people have been looking at Arctic sea ice extent, and they say things are going wrong. And we had a big dip in 2008. We had a big dip in 2012, and then it went up again. And a lot of people say, "Oh, so it wasn't as bad as it was." Now, the big problem is not so much sea ice extent, it is the thickness of the ice. And the problem is that the ice is melting away all year long from the bottom. And that is because the ocean is getting ever hotter. Now, what can we do about that? One of the things is, you want to say something, Jim?
Oh, yeah. I do, and but also James has had his hand up for maybe 20 minutes or so. So and normally what we do when we have people waiting to talk is we normally cap it at 2 minutes, right? But now, since it's it's kind of late in the evening and we've been going strong for several hours, we're kind of at a little, and also you're relatively new to the block party, so I wanted to give you some more time. But really what we do mostly with this space is we make it conversational, right? And so we pass around the talking stick quite a bit. So anyway, if that sounds fair to you, we can hear from James, and then I'd like to make a comment, and then pass it back to you, Ben, if you have more to say, which it looks like you do. Okay, great, awesome, James. Thank you so much for your patience. You're a gentleman, and take it away, James.
All right, thanks. I thought you were going back to that other gentleman there. I didn't mind if he wanted to finish his point, to be honest. But I get where he's coming from, and I understand I understand exactly what he's saying, and in regards to about the ice melting and the priority and what we do about this, and I understand about what he's talking about. No doubt, solar power for the moment is a technology that is better than the burning of fossil fuels. However, there seems to be a little bit of misunderstanding about solar panels as well. And I think if you refer to Michael Moore's film recently, there, Planet of the Humans, you'll see that solar panels, although they are more efficient at acquiring electricity from the sun, they require a vast amount of fossil fuels to produce by melting coal with salt or with sand at very high temperatures in order to make the materials to make the solar panels. So that, in a sense, is still using fossil fuels to create that type of technology. No, at the moment, it's better than constantly just burning fossil fuels and producing solar panels. So yeah, we have to stop burning the fossil fuels. I understand your urgency there, and whatever we can use, whatever technologies we can use, that we can collectively put together is all a good thing. And I understand where you're coming from. Wind turbines are another great thing. I understand that as well. However, the technologies around wind turbines as well now is becoming under question as well, in relation to oil leakages and hydraulic liquids leaking out into the ground and contaminating water sources and what have you. So they just need to further think about how do they deal with those issues in order to keep those types of technologies going. But that's grand. I understand. And what your third point you were making about
you know, getting outsourcing stuff to other countries, poorer countries and everything, and getting carbon credits. And you know, I think what that term for that is called carbon offsetting. You know what I mean? It's offsetting your carbon tax debt, what you're supposed to as a society pay for, but by, you know, it's an underhanded tax cheat, as far as I think Guy McPherson mentions it, in the sense that the country is not actually offsetting any carbon really by right, like they're just paying some other country to do it for them, and that country is just pouring out the carbon instead. So it doesn't matter. What we're here for is the bigger question, like you're on about with the ice melting. That is our priority. To the cooling of the planet is our priority here in Collective Intelligence Block Party. But in order to do that now, at the moment, we have to deal with another priority which has come along. And I know I don't need to mention the name of it, but you know, we're dealing with this pandemic, and it's Dos Equis, we call it ourselves. But so that's a priority, and people are being urged to stay at home, and the only reason really people are coming out at the moment is to earn the money to get food, or to go and get food. Other than that, they need to stay inside. And we're only discussing methods to come up with solutions for all these new problems, because we're going to be facing lots of new problems as we go along in the very near future. And if we don't sit down now and start getting together and having these conversations, then and come up with some solutions prior to you know, it's no point waiting for these things to happen and then try and think up of something to happen, you know, call the fire brigade. We need to preemptive these tactics and get them ready, like think up solutions for what's coming down the road. But we also have a lot of things that we need to deal with now, like urgently, like. So that's what we're here for. I understand what you're coming from. It's commendable that Canberra's doing, you know, that. We actually have a system over here now that it's the EU regulation, and it's rather than burning gas for your heating, and rather than using solar panels for your heating, well, there's a combination of solar panels. Sorry, no, I won't keep it long, Jamin. It's a new system. It's called air to water.
No, you're fine, James. We've gone into long format mode, so you're fine.
It's a new system of heating. It's called air to water heating, and basically there's a unit installed in your place, and it draws in the air outside, the cold air, and it's condensed into and pumped. Then the condensed air gets hot, and it pumps the hot water, heats the water, and pumps the water around your house. So, and that's then facilitated with solar panels to help offset the electrical cost for it. So it reduces your power heating bills by half in a year, at least. So it's a new alternative to just burning gas now. You can get rid of gas and go for air to water heating. It's worth the investment. It's an EU regulation now anyway. It's going to be installed in all houses, you know what I mean? I had it installed here only last year or two ago there now, and it's because it's EU regulations. Yeah, sorry for going on, but we're here anyway to address all these issues, and definitely we know what the priorities are, and I understand where you're coming about the ice melting. That is probably one of our main issues. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, James. Absolutely, without question. Let's see. So I'd like to address a few points, and then pass it back to Ben, and then Emery also has his hand up. But before all that, I want to say welcome to a very special guest, my cousin Bill, who I call Smoker. We kind of call each other Smoker. Anyway, that's Bill. And I think you probably recognize just about everybody from last time, except Ben is relatively new. Ben's down in Australia, in Canberra, Australia, you know, the capital of the whole country. You probably remember Jackie, and then we've got who's in London, England. We've got Myra. Jackie and Myra are both in Arizona, as is Melvin. And we got James in Cork, Ireland. So anyway, and Emery's up in Montreal, Canada. Anyway, welcome back. And we're talking about some interesting stuff. I'll also comment that in about 20 minutes, I'm going to take a break. I will. The block party does not sleep for 24 hours. The block party rocks on for 24 hours straight. But in 20 minutes, which for me will be 15 hours into the block party, I get a 5-hour break and I rest for 5 hours. And then I'm back on duty at 2 a.m. until the block party wraps up at 6 a.m. So in 20 minutes, I will break. But anyway, so I just wanted to make that quick logistical comment. And then the block party will be facilitated for those 5 hours by Nolan, who you also will recall from previous meetings. And anyway, so Nolan will kick in about 20 minutes. All right. So what I'd like to say is, in terms of how to refreeze the Arctic, right? How to actually refreeze, rebuild Arctic ice, both thickness and extent. There's 3 methods of doing that. There's 3 main ways to do that. One has to do with cooling the planet as a whole, right? If you could imagine putting the entire planet into a refrigerator, right? And turning it to its highest setting, just cooling the whole planet as a whole, will contribute to refreezing the Arctic, but probably not fast enough, probably not in time, right? Simply because there's so much thermal inertia, there's so much heat stored in the ocean, and the ocean is what's chipping away, as you pointed out, Ben, on the Arctic ice from underneath, right? With the concentrated heat, especially the concentrated heat of the ocean at the poles. Of course, we're talking about the North Pole with the Arctic. All right. So how do we combat that? How do we refreeze the Arctic in addition to the big lever that may not be fast enough for the Arctic, the big lever of cooling the planet? And the cooling the planet through SRM, through solar radiation management, essentially not essentially, it's literally as simple as reflecting a portion of the sunlight that's coming at the Earth, reflecting it back into space, so it can't heat up the planet in the first place. That's the big lever. That's our big bet for cooling the planet in time, just given the greenhouse gases and now the loss of global dimming. We've got to break out the big guns of SRM, or we're going to lose the war. It's as simple as that. These are the guns of Navarone that are going to win this decisive battle of planetary overheating for us. Now, we have a related, very closely related, very important battle for saving the ice. And there's 2 other ways of doing that. It's really, when we talk about preventing further ice melting and refreezing the ice, those are 2 sides of the same coin. And the coin is called cooling the Arctic, right? And, preventing further melting, enabling refreezing, both of those are achieved by local cooling. So in addition to SRM, which is more planetary scale, actually, before we leave SRM, one of the ways of doing SRM is putting constellations, vast arrays of mirrors in the oceans to reflect sunlight back into space from the oceans. We can definitely concentrate mirrors up around the Arctic, right? To do localized cooling of the Arctic ocean water, in addition to the planetary scale cooling, which is the big lever of SRM. That's what I keep referring to as the big lever, is just cooling the planet generally. But by putting by concentrating mirrors up around, I'm hearing what sounds like crickets coming from James, but that's weird. because James is on mute. Anyway, it's probably aliens or something like that, or NSA or some such.
It was me. I'm so sorry. I got out looking for some stamps that I lost as I was walking. So yeah, there's a bunch of crickets. I didn't notice that I was unmuted.
Okay, no problem. Thanks, Myra. Thank you. Okay, I was kind of happier with one of my conspiracy theories, so thanks for bursting that bubble. But anyway, back to it. So, so concentrating mirrors up in the Arctic, and as opposed to like putting them on the equator, is one way of helping to cool the Arctic specifically. There's two other ways, and I'm going to screen share to show these two other ways. Okay, so one of these two other ways is ice911.org. They're a nonprofit started by a Stanford lecturer. And let's see, looks like they've got a, I just want to show like why the Arctic, frequently, I just want to show like what a picture of their solution, which is all about, so you see this powder there that's in that they're pouring into that person's hand. That's not actually cocaine. That's silica, like little tiny fine, basically sand, right? It's basically sand, right? You know, that's what the material is. And so the sand is so white, it's so reflective that basically what they're doing is they're putting it on places where the ice is a little bit darker than pure white, and it ends up reflecting sunlight back into space. So let's call that the ice-911 solution. Then there's another solution that I came up with, which is to take basically oil booms. You see, these are all pictures of oil booms, which they deploy when there's an oil spill. They'll contain it with the oil boom, and then they'll put like sawdust on the surface to absorb it, and then, you know, drag it all into a convenient spot for scooping it up or whatever. Anyway, that's an oil boom. So now imagine an oil boom that instead of being for cleaning up an oil spill, contains huge amounts. I'm talking like trillions, and I'm gonna go back to video here, but like huge amounts of basically like golf ball size. Ugo, welcome, Ugo. How you doing? Like I don't know, probably like trillions or tens of trillions of like golf ball size reflective balls made of that same material, that silica material, which is basically sand, right? So it's totally non-toxic. You don't need to worry about it. Anyway, what would these golf balls do? It's just more reflectivity, but in this case, right around the edges of the Arctic ice. You see what I'm saying? So ice-911 covers the surface of the Arctic ice and provides reflectivity there. What I'm suggesting with the oil booms is to add reflectivity in, you know, the hundreds of kilometers or so beyond the edges of the Arctic sea ice. And those booms would contain those so that they'd stay and do their job close to the ice. And that would provide massive local cooling. It would reflect all that sunlight back into space that would otherwise hit dark blue ocean Arctic seawater and heat it up. Anyway, so in summary, those are the three ways of refreezing the Arctic. SRM generally, preferentially concentrated near the Arctic, ice-911, and Jamin's oil boom golf ball solution. Anyway, with that, I'm going to pass it back to you, Ben, and then Emery has his hand up. And so we got two folks in the queue, Ben and Emery, and we're probably reasonably, at this point, I don't know, maybe at a pace of everyone talks for maybe, you know, 2 or 3 minutes. If you want to go a little long, maybe go 4, that kind of thing. And I'm happy to keep time, but then I'll be dropping off in 10, 15 minutes or so. But go ahead, Ben, if now is a good time for you.
Ja, nee, is goed. Sorry, switching languages.
No, speak in Dutch.
I'm sorry,
right?
Yeah, we speak Dutch at home, and Marion is giving language to the Marion. Oops. Marion is teaching languages actually over both German, French, and Dutch.
And
So
yeah.
that's interesting. That consumes my 2 minutes, unfortunately.
we can try that. We can try that.
Yeah. I'll tie it up because I was just saying, normally I research things a little better so I can share scientific papers when I say something. I'll try to do it from memory. Professor Jacobson did a study into surface whitening.
Is that Mark Jacobson from?
Mark Jacobson. Yeah, you had him at the Share Club.
Yeah, go ahead.
Damon, yeah. No, he looked at surface whitening, especially white roofs, white streets, so painting things white, whether it would improve the situation. And his conclusion was that it does reflect sunlight, but a lot of sunlight gets reflected back because of the pollution in the air. And that means if you do the overall calculation, and energy that previously went into a building or the road, the road, so to say.
Okay, Ben, it's like your signal is being scrambled by the NSA, which means what you're really important. That's why they're trying to block it. So. No, Ben, before you blow up, just write it down on a piece of paper and mail it to me. You sound like Ben. Can you hear me, Ben? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? You sound like a secret love child between Darth Vader and somebody who's being drowned, right? So it's I kind of feel like I died and went to hell or something like that. So let's let Emery talk, and then maybe I'll come back to life here. Okay, and then maybe if you can figure out your acoustics, reset it or something, that'll probably help. Okay, Emery, thanks for your patience, and please bring us back.
Jimin.
Yeah, I think Ben could do without his video like you normally suggest, and maybe his audio will get improved. However, what I wanted to say was that I can appreciate what Ben has said before, that we need all hands on deck, and that means that everybody who gets involved, okay, have different talents and abilities. And I agree with Ben, let it all flow. Let everybody do what they can to add to the solution. So I'm in agreement with that. And about the ice, well, we know that, we've known that for a while now, that it's melting from the bottom. And that's thanks to our nuclear friends there. The nuclear age has brought us to this point. Now, as far as cooling the planet goes, there are some solutions. I prefer the natural ones. Maybe we could set off a few volcanoes, but it's hard to control the after effects. It's hard to modulate. That's the problem. And we want to keep the planet warm enough to be able to grow all the food that's necessary to feed all the hungry people also. So we got to take care of that, and we got to be sure that we're not going to disrupt the global dimming that Guy McPherson has so eloquently explained to all of us, and we understand what the global dimming is a result of, and that's industrialization. and we got to keep the industries going somehow. And if that means burning the dirty coal or whatever for now, until other solutions kick in. So this is a deep thought, and we need big time collective intelligence here, and big time involvement from a lot of people. And we'll get there. We're not going to build Google all in one go. That's for sure. But let's keep on it.
Beautiful. Thanks, Emery. All right, I want to welcome Kushbu, who's joining us from India. And Kushbu.
Hi.
Hey,
Hi.
how you doing? How are you?
I think I'm awesome today.
Good, good.
Just having my morning coffee and starting to work.
All right. All right.
What's up? How are you guys been? How is the party going on?
It's gone super awesome, Kushbu. Really awesome.
So what you guys up to?
Well, we figured out how we are going to feed everyone all around the world nutritious, immune boosting, whole food, plant-based diet delivered directly to everyone's home, right? It's going to take a little while to get there, but we're going to get there. And then nutritious foods delivered to everyone become a basic human right that we, humanity as a whole, fulfill on, right? No more hungry people, no more malnourished people, no more people with compromised immune systems due to subpar diet, and people also get to stay home because the food is delivered to them, right? So we're talking about by far the biggest food project ever undertaken by humanity, by long shot. And so it's going to require essentially redesigning our food networks. But the good news is, Kushbu, right? Remember that kitchen that you always wanted to redesign but couldn't quite get around to doing? Suddenly a big asteroid came down and boom, blew up that whole kitchen. It's gone.
Okay.
So now you get...
My dogs might be sleeping in the kitchen. Please don't say that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Yoda. See, one of Kushbu's dogs is named Yoda. Yoda, 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 Yoda.
Yeah, he's not coming. He's on the terrace.
All right. Anyway, so we have determined a plan for getting this whole thing started, right? And so think of it like exponential dominoes, where the first domino is tiny, 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 and it pushes over a domino that's a little bigger, a little bigger, a little bigger, and the next thing you know, you've knocked over the Empire State Building. There's actually a really good video on the Smithsonian website. You can search for it on YouTube or whatever. But anyway, it shows. So so what's the first domino? The first domino is feeding everyone in, drum roll, feeding everyone in Brooklyn, New York.
Okay.
Feeding everyone in Brooklyn, New York. Now, Jackie is from New York. And it's a perfect place on multiple levels. I will let Jackie speak to that because she can address it best. Jackie, why is Brooklyn, New York such a great place for us to focus our efforts to feed everyone?
I think Brooklyn is, just because of what's going on with New York being the epicenter, I think it's, they need our help so much. But I also believe that it's because, and I've had the pleasure of meeting the Brooklyn Borough President, who is an African-American gentleman who used to be a police officer, who is vegan, who reversed his own diseases through a plant-based lifestyle, and then wrote a book about it. I mean, I think he's perfect. He supports the vegan events. That's where I met him. And right now he's even doing this on a low level scale. He's feeding the community. I feel he needs support. I feel that that would be perfect for us to come in as a coalition, as support for him to bring this message to, and we were just told by Melissa that Brooklyn is, out of all the 5 boroughs, the hardest hit. It is the, if I'm not mistaken, one of the most, if not the most dense population. There is some affluence, but there's a lot of poverty. There's a lot of projects. I'm from the projects. I know what that's like to live like that. And I can't even imagine what it's like being in this quarantine for weeks and weeks under those conditions. I just think it's prime. I think it's ready. And I think people want to be helped. And I think there will be open to our message, because we're not trying to come in and save or fix. We're coming in to support. We're coming in to bring resources. We're coming in to basically tell him we have your back. We know what you're trying to do. We know what you're capable of doing, and you need support, and we're coming in. Vegan World 2026 is coming in to help you do what we know to be best for your community members and be an example for the rest of New York and for the rest of the country, then for the rest of the hemisphere, and then the rest of the world.
The idea, I really do. And so I just wanted to bring in the light something which I have been desperately wanting to do, and I kind of started also doing something. So I have a nice terrace, and I'm gonna make like a DIY some kind of greenery, like basic green stuff which house need, like chilies and spinach and coriander and brinjals and potatoes, things like that, which is not, yeah, which is doable. So and in India that is quite possible. It's just that we forgot how to do that. And I would really request if you guys can add that also, like support somebody who might can grow for 4 or 5 people around their homes, and because decentralization, if there is a centralized system, then I want to doubt it, kind of, for now, because I think there is, I don't know, I don't have a concrete vocabulary to express that why I think that way, but I'm not saying there is any evil in it, for sure, but I'm saying that if I can feed 5 people, and if there are 20 people in my area who are feeding 5 people, my small locality will be covered. Then there will be only issue for making available grains like wheat or rice, and so the centralized system will have a narrow focus if this kind of things have been taken care of. So something on those lines I wanted to add. And in fact, I'm collecting baskets right now from people so that I can put yeah, I can grow something. So I have a little land, but dogs keep digging that, and it's there, so I cannot touch it. But yeah, I'm very conscious about it, and I'm starting it. And amen to all your dreams and aspirations. Yeah, thank you. Go ahead. Do you want me to say? Do you want anything else to know from here? From India?
I'm sure we want to know lots from India, and I can't wait till we start working and collaborating, because here's the thing. So is that, of course, the more local, the better, and the more exactly the scenario you described, the better. Absolutely no question about it. In fact, we've talked about that extensively for the Brooklyn project. Everything from people growing food inside their own homes with permaculture, rooftop gardens, windowsill gardens, et cetera, to community gardens, right?
Yeah.
And expanding community gardens. Maybe we even close off certain streets and just bring in soil on top of the asphalt, right? And, plant. And then all the way to farms, which are further out, right? Including ultimately rice farms, which may be in another continent, right? But so through a combination of all these, always striving to bring it more and more local, right? More and more. But in terms of centralization, it's sort of a toughie, because there are some benefits to centralization, but it's local. But it's local centralization. It would be, Brooklyners, right? In charge of their own destiny. But what they might do is do one centralized order for 4 truckloads of broccoli, right? To buy all of a farmer's crop, bring it all in refrigerated, get it delivered to all the different places that need it to produce food. So that would be like a centralized order, a centralized delivery, et cetera, et cetera. So, we'll find the right balance. But in the end, this is definitely not something for profit. It is something that would be driven by the collective intelligence. And so think of it as sort of a decentralized collective intelligence working on figuring out everything, including centralized purchases. So it sounds like a contradiction in terms, but obviously you see that it's not.
I get it. In fact, I think I said this in the last weekend party also, that maybe for next week when this party comes back online, I think one of us could create a small presentation on a book called Hind Swaraj, Indian Home Rule, which was written by Mahatma Gandhi, and such a hypocritic mind I have. I'm having a cigarette and talking about Mahatma Gandhi.
I think it's awesome. So smoke on.
I don't think so. I won't be able to see eye to eye in him in the another plate. I know that. anyways, but so the ideas which we are talking about, that man was trying to emphasize. That is why he backed off from the Indian freedom movement at particular point, because he was like, no, this is not an Indian home rule. This is we are just becoming a free Western country. We lost the cultural aspect of it. Anyways, it was his regrets and pain, but I think I can do something about it. So that Hind Swaraj book which you guys are talking about, it mentions that when the world, so it doesn't talk about freedom and independence. They say the Swaraj, the word means sustainability, like my own rule over my own world. So and rule means like if there is a law, and if you are a conscious citizen, it means that you are paying certain kind of duties. So taking care of a local manufacturing system, local production system is kind of essential duty. So the best thing about that book and what you were talking, something which triggered me, is he makes sure for everybody, the way the document is written, what we are talking about, those ideas doesn't sound radical. Right now, what even we also feel that what we are talking, it's a radical movement, it's a radical change. But the way he has presented it feels normal stuff. It's not a radical. It's not it. He has presented those ideas in that manner, and yeah, it's just my social worker mind working, because we have to, when we design something, we have to focus on the adaptability. Yeah, Android phone is developed. Now nobody knows to how to read English. So they figured it out, all the native languages, right? So in Hindi here, people can use Android phones. So it was not limited by, the moment it stopped being limited by the English language, it became, uh, adaptability of the technology became easy for for anybody in the world. So, something on those ideas, that what we are speaking, how we can develop the vocabulary, that the ideas doesn't sound radical. Well, it is radical, but we have to box it such, like the marketing, so-called marketing set. We have to box it such that people think that it's easy, it's natural, it's soft. The the eros aspect of of the idea, you know. um yeah, yeah, sorry, I know I don't wish to hijack it, but yeah. That's it. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Kushbu. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right, I want to welcome my colleague Nolan, who I mentioned earlier. Nolan is here. So I've been here facilitating the block party for the last 15 hours, minus, little breaks here and there. So I need a break myself. So Nolan is going to fill in for me as chief facilitator for the next 5 hours. You will be flying on Collective Intelligence Airways, and your pilot is Captain Nolan Strait. So anyway, I'm sure you guys will all get each other up to speed. Jackie, I trust you'll be here for at least a little longer to give Nolan a good handoff. All right, awesome. Any final words or requests from me? Nolan, I'm going to go ahead and make you host, if that's all right. Make host.
I would just say to reiterate there, Jamin, with Nolan, know that he's must be mindful of not allowing anyone to be able to share without permission.
Oh, yeah. We had an unfortunate incident early this morning when somebody came in. They were. I saw them in the waiting room, and I, let them in. I had not disabled screen sharing because that had never been an issue in the past. But now I've disabled it. Why? Because that person who came in screen shared something just horrific, and it was just it was horrific. So that's why we don't allow people to screen share unless we just give them permission one at a time. And I'm sure there's a way to do that. But anyway.
We faced this issue a month back in the other group I'm part of. Yeah, and it was just a prank call of teenage boys.
Yeah. We've had issues in the past, but today was particularly horrific. Anyway, it was Christine. I don't anticipate they'll be back. I mean, I ejected them from the room, so they can't come back. But just FYI. Anyway.
Yeah. Sure.
Can you give a recap for me? I know I was gone for a while. Where are we at right now?
Yeah. Jackie, you want to take that on so I can get a little break? Anyway, with that, great to see you all. I'll be back in 5 hours. So just everyone set your alarms for, no, I'm just kidding. Anyway.
Rest well.
Thank you very much. Love you all. And this is a super awesome conversation. I will stop recording here, and then Nolan, you can record on your end. That sound good? Okay, great.